We're good, Evan.
It's a little slow on mine. It says scheduled still.
Oh.
I think we're live.
Yeah, jump into it. We're live.
All right. And welcome, everybody, to another edition of Mock It Like It's Hot, presented to you by Club Fantasy FFL. I am the Evan Bushman. Of course, is my host to the most, Ryan Weisse. Ryan, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, happy to be here. Happy to be back mocking 1 week later. Happy to have probably, I don't want to say my favorite guest because it's such a slight to Mike, but anybody who knows me knows I adore Kyra, and having her on the show is just a dream come true this early in the season. So
that's right. Joining us for this week's draft is from Fantasy Pros and also Club Fantasy FFL, Kyra Wiaterowski. Kyra, how's it going?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is kind of like homey to me, except I'm down on the bottom here. I'm an actual guest. I'm used to being in Ryan's spot over there with, normally my head's not cut off like Ryan's, but
exactly.
I'm excited. I love drafting. I'm a drafting addict. That's why I'm in so many leagues at the end of at the beginning of every season. So I'm excited to let people know some of my thoughts on that process.
Awesome. Well, before we get into the draft, if you didn't join us for our introductory show, this draft is more like the educational facilitator way of us trying to teach you how to draft your perfect fantasy team going into this year's drafts and beyond. If you're a novice, a beginner, you don't know how to draft, we're going to teach you how to do those, especially on a week-to-week basis. We're going to be doing different types of drafts for different settings each week. So you have a kind of a feel of, hey, this is how this draft works. This is how this draft works, and so on and so forth. So you can ask your questions in the chat. We'll be able to answer those while we do the drafts and so on. So make sure to follow us, hit that subscribe button on Club Fantasy FFL, follow us on all the social media platforms as well. Ryan, before we get into the draft, what kind of draft are we doing this week?
All right. Well, we decided to keep it simple again. We upped it from 10 teams to 12 teams this week. We still were able to fill the draft up. So thank you to everybody who joined. Every week around 10 o'clock, I'll be dropping that link. Actually, 9 o'clock, I'll be dropping that link for more and more people to join. We love to have you. It's a much better draft if we're drafting with you instead of bots. This week, we are sticking with redraft. We are sticking with one quarterback. We're dropping down to 0.5 PPR to kind of mitigate some of those high pass catching volume and bring some of those touchdown scores back up. And we got rid of defense and kicker. I think I proved my point last week. You shouldn't be drafting them, and you guys did a great job with that. We also dropped down to 2 wide receivers instead of 3, but added an additional flex spot. So same amount of starters, but giving you a little bit more variety. So I am going to go ahead and get the draft started. And I believe it is Kelly in Phoenix, our girl, who has the 101, and the draft has started.
So Ryan and Kyra, kind of either one of you could take this. What's the difference really between a half point and a full point PPR draft? So if anybody doesn't really know like the whole scoring mechanism when it comes to those types of drafts, kind of tell them what is the difference between the two.
Kyra, I'll let you jump in first always.
Hold on. I'm kind of waiting because my pick's about to.
I'll jump in.
Adams. I'm waiting for my pick here.
Yeah, I was gonna say Kelly threw me off right off the rip with 101 Devonta Adams, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But for me, the big difference between half PPR, full PPR is pass catching running backs. They're gonna fall a little bit in the draft, and then high volume, low touchdown wide receivers. We talked about how great of a value he was last week, and he still is. A guy like Hunter Renfrow, who sees a ton of volume, he's gonna fall a little bit in a half PPR just because you're not going to be guaranteed the touchdowns. You're not going to be guaranteed the yardage. You're just guaranteed a ton of catches. And I'll throw another guy out, Stephon Diggs, unless you see his touchdown rate come back up, is more of a PPR wide receiver 1, whereas in half PPR, he kind of falls into the high wide receiver 2 range. So
now, Kyra, you picked 4th before the show started. You were just like, this pick I have, the 4th one in a 12-man league, is just like one of the worst in the world. Kind of tell me what the mindset was picking 4th and your strategies going forward in a 12-man league.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick 4th just because I felt like it gave us more to talk about. I think that when you pick with those top 3 picks there, it's pretty like a mindless operation, other than what Kelly did. Kelly really kind of threw us off for a loop there going Devonta Adams 1, but you never know. With some leagues, especially home leagues, people do crazy stuff that you just never expect. But normally it's pretty, cut and dry. You're going to see the top 3 running backs come off the board, or you're just going to see, depending on the format of the league, you know who's going with those couple first picks. So I wanted to go fourth to give you a little more insight about like where do I go from here once the brainless picks are done. For me, it's almost always a running back in those top like early rounds there, just because I want to get someone elite and I'll build out from there. I want to have somebody that I know has sure touches that I'm not really questioning if they're in a committee or anything like that. So I went Derrick Henry because that's the king. I think sometimes during injury, people forget how elite people are. And that could sometimes, he would have been easily, if he played out that full season, he could have been arguably one of those first 3 picks too. So that's why I decided to go Derrick Henry there. I'm going to let the draft play itself out. It seems like it's running back heavy right now. So I'm going to take advantage of the value at wide receiver here. And on the comeback around, we'll see where we're at.
So before we get back to Kelly and Phoenix's pick at her next one, she took Devonta Adams at 1. Now, of course, he was traded on Friday to the Las Vegas Raiders in a huge blockbuster trade where, once again, the Green Bay Packers just like to alienate all their star players once again by letting Devonta go. I wanted to ask both of you the question, like his value going to Las Vegas. Now, they've got a ton of weapons over in Las Vegas with Darren Waller. They also have Josh Jacobs. They also have a plethora of other wide receivers that they have on their team. And I think the biggest question mark is Derek Carr going to be able to get him the rock like he did, Aaron Rodgers did in Green Bay? Is his value going to stay the same? Is it going to have an uptick, or is it going to have a downtick going over to Las Vegas?
Me personally, I think that he's going to have a downtick. And I don't say that like, Devonta Adams is going to fall out of the top 5 wide receivers. Probably not. But for him to finish first, I'd be surprised because, Aaron Rodgers, really, there was no competition for targets for Devonta Adams over in the Packers offense. He force-fed him that ball. And even if Derek Carr were to do that, you still have Darren Waller out there who's a threat. You have Hunter Renfrow out there who's a threat. If they ever use Josh Jacobs in the pass, there's Josh Jacobs randomly right there. If they ever use him in the passing game, he could pose as a threat. So I think that, given age, given that he's not no spring chicken, he's going to regret. He is going to regress here at some point. Switching teams, it's not always the world's best thing. It might take a little bit for them to even catch that chemistry. They haven't played together, since 2013, 14, something around that range, compared to him and Aaron Rodgers, who have been like peanut butter and jelly, the last couple of years. So
just to clarify, Kelly, I know Josh Jacobs is a running back, not a wide receiver. So let's tie that back into the value of Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow was he's still an overlooked fantasy wide receiver for a lot of people. But now, since Devonta Adams is going to that team, do you see Renfrow's value kind of, I wouldn't say skyrocket, but really kind of take that uptick in fantasy, because now they're going to be looking more at Devonta Adams than they are Hunter Renfrow on Las Vegas?
I was going to say, I'm not the least bit worried about Renfrow, Waller, or Adams. I was digging into this for a Football Guys article. I think there are 140 plus vacated targets on the Raiders right now. You can expect a large, if not all of that, just to fall right to Devonta Adams. That's not an unheard number. This is a 160 target guy. So 140 is definitely a downtick. I do agree with Kyra on that, where we may not see number 1, but top 5 is still well within the cards of Devonta Adams. But all of that still allows Darren Waller to see the 100+ targets he saw. Last year he was at 93, but he missed some time. And Hunter Renfrow was 120 last year. There's no reason to expect those guys to really fall. The biggest concern is going to be, we've never really seen a system with Josh McDaniels where he's had a superstar alpha wide receiver, a great slot wide receiver, a great receiving tight end, and a pass catching running back. He's always had 3 of the 4, because we saw the James White, Gronk, Julian Edelman years and things like that. We saw the Randy Moss, Welker, and I don't even know who the running back was at that time, probably still James White, but they didn't have Gronk at that point. So it's going to be interesting to see. Josh Jacobs was a favorite of everybody to catch way more passes this year, and I don't know if that's going to be the case. However, the Damian Harris touchdown scoring for Josh Jacobs is still going to be there. And Kyra kind of brought up, the chemistry might not be there right away. The chemistry might not be there for this entire offense right away, because we don't know if Josh McDaniels is going to be able to get that bought in immediately when it comes time to it. So
we just had a string of tight ends go off the board in the 3rd round: Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, and then also Kyle Pitts coming off the board as well. And then our first quarterback is Josh Allen taken off the board as well. Thoughts about Josh Allen getting taken in the 3rd round, first quarterback off the board?
I mean, he's worthy of it for sure. I'm not one of those people though who will draft. I usually miss out on the Josh Allens and Patrick Mahomes of the world because I'm not very likely to take a quarterback high. I'd much rather this. I think the skill position players are super valuable still in this range, and I rather build around that and go late round quarterback. That's kind of my strategy. It's kind of always been. But it's no surprise to me there. He's the first quarterback taken off the board at all. I mean, he uses his legs, got a hell of an arm. Bills are fantastic, so I get it.
Okay. Now, Ryan, you and I did a 10-person draft last week where, 10-person drafts, you're really still kind of getting like almost like a superstar team when you're doing those types of drafts. Now, a 12-person league, it's a little bit different. The strategies are a little bit, more creative, more strategic, especially when it comes into the later rounds. If you're really a beginner person going and doing a 12-person league, what would be your mindset about the drafting? Now, obviously, you want to get your running backs and your wide receivers off the board before then you really have to go into the middle rounds. But what is your strategy if you're a novice beginner going into a 12-person league, just kind of like the first time?
I was just going to say, so it really depends on the draft slot you end up in. If you're early, I do think it needs to be running backs early. And this draft actually kind of leans into that. I think it's 5 of the first 7 picks, 9 of the first 10 or 8 of the first 10 picks are wide receiver or running backs rather, not wide receiver, because running back scarcity is a big thing. You're not going to have a bunch of bell cow running backs, whereas wide receivers is a very deep position. So if you end up with one of those early picks, the running backs may not fall to you in the 3rd, 4th round to play around with the 0 running back strategy. So I think you do need to go running back heavy early if you're in the first part of the draft. If you're in the second part of the draft, like where I was, you're going to see who falls to you. I got very lucky with Najee Harris falling to me all the way down to the turn. I am a get your elite tight end guy. I know at the 112-2-1 turn, I'm not going to get an elite tight end at the 312. So I knew I was taking Travis Kelsey with this pick unless somebody went crazy and got him earlier. I knew that coming into this. It was literally how I built my entire draft strategy, but we'll get into that later. The back end is more where you're going to let the draft fall to you. You're going to see running backs like we saw in this draft already. Joe Mixon, who probably should not have fallen all the way to the 202. Javonta Williams is a guy who we talked about last week, and this week he did go ahead of DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones. So that's a guy who's he kind of comes to you. George Kittle by you, Evan, grabbing that, and then coming back around to see Kelly and Faith being able to grab elite tight ends, and possibly Josh. We don't know what we're going to get out of Pitts. In the early picks, I'm all about letting the draft come to you and taking the best player available, except if you're in one of those first 5 to 6 picks, you probably need to go running back.
Okay. Kyra, what are your thoughts? If you're like a novice or beginner, do you kind of like the same mentality Ryan has, or is your maybe kind of your draft strategy a little bit different than what he has?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with just pretty much being agreeable to what Ryan said. And the only thing that I'm going to say differently is, one thing that I think you need to not do is when there's a run on players. So like for me, one of my strategies usually is to take a top 3 tight end. I usually try to do that within that around that turn where it happened. And as you can see, Travis Kelsey, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts, they were all gone before I got to pick in my 3rd round. So I'm not going to reach for somebody there because I feel like the best possible tight ends went off the board. So I'll pivot to, sorry, hold on, it's my pick right now.
You're good.
I'll
and we talked about that last week too. Being the last person in a run, but reaching for that last person, that's a mistake. Be a part of the next run. Be the first person in the next run. Don't be the last person in the previous run.
I always try to pivot towards where people were lacking. So everyone went on a run for tight ends there. So they're leaving the wide receiver room wide open with great opportunities there. So I'll just pivot. I'll go wide receiver, and it's probably going to stop that tight end run. So I'm not worried about it. And it did. As you can see, nobody picked a tight end.
Well, I actually want to talk about too, on that same note, if you look, that helped Joe out greatly as well, because if you look at that roundabout picks, you have starting with AJ Brown all the way around to Deebo Samuel, only one running back taken there. So Joe was able to grab David Montgomery, a top 10 running back in the 3rd round because of that big swing around. And let's not forget, Montgomery's competition for carries is not getting better, and that team is likely to get better. I think that's a great pick coming at the back end of a run where it was all pass catchers and Joe was able to land running back. Now, Joe is a guy who will tell you it's 3 running backs to start your draft no matter what. And he stuck with his thing here, and it's working out quite well for him. So,
Kyra, I like your pick in the 4th round or the 5th round where Amari Cooper just kind of slid into your pick. Of course, now he is over in Cleveland. Cleveland just had a huge transaction late Friday afternoon with Deshaun Watson being traded to the Cleveland Browns with a huge contract extension. Now, obviously, Deshaun Watson's status is really kind of unknown right now with all the off-field issues that he's going on with the civil lawsuits, with all the accusations. Now, tell me about, Amari Cooper. Why did you pick Amari Cooper just now?
Yeah, so as I'm looking at the board here, I am not in love with particularly any of the running backs that are left on the board. I'm looking at wide receivers. I'm still not crazy about the tight ends. I'm still going to push it back. I'm probably going to be disappointed in who my tight end is, but I'd rather my roster be strong. So I'm looking at the wide receivers because that's always deep. And I'm looking at Amari Cooper there. He is the undoubted wide receiver 1 in that offense. He's going to have a ton of targets. I'm looking at the list here, and I mean, we lost Michael Thomas, who's probably the other one, arguably, but again, another situation where the quarterback is we don't know yet. Hopefully Jameis Winston. But looking at these wide receivers, I'm gonna want to go with the guy that has the clear cut to targets. So instead of taking Tyler Lockett, who shares with DK Metcalf, another sketchy quarterback situation, Adam Thielen, who's going to lose targets to Justin Jefferson, I figured why not take the value in Cooper. I think people, again, you got to realize he's in a different situation, different team. If Deshaun Watson's throwing him the ball, I want his wide receiver 1, no doubt about it. I do expect a suspension, so it might be, a couple of games till he comes to fruition. But I just hope to build my roster to accommodate that as well.
Okay. Before we get into my next question about the Cleveland Browns offense too, do you both believe that best available is sometimes the best way to go when drafting, or is best available just something they're thrown out there as best available players is there, but is he really the best available there at that pick?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the overall picture sometimes when you're doing that. A lot of times I do pick best available, especially because I don't like to reach. I just don't. And even if, that means I have way too many wide receivers and my running back room is kind of bleak, then okay, well then I'll make a trade with somebody who accidentally messed up and did the same thing as me, and we could work together on fixing that. You don't just throw out. I think sometimes people, especially a lot of just casual fantasy football players, will draft and they'll be like, my draft effing sucked. Like my team looks like shit. Like I messed up bad. You can take advantage of this. Always at the end of a draft, I always look at everybody's team. I'm like, what can I do to help them and what can they do to help me? And I'll make trades and do stuff like that too. So don't feel like it's a bad idea to take best available because those names sell.
Right.
So,
and for those who haven't followed Kyra for any period of time, Kyra loves trades. It's something she values in fantasy so much. And it's the way you need to be. We talked a lot about this last week. And at the end of the show, we're going to pick, the person who has the most to improve. Part of that improving is trades. And that's exactly what Kyra said is at the end of your draft, look at the teams who might hate their team. Watch the league chat message board because someone's going to be like, man, I screwed up at running back. And maybe your 4th running back is worth a ton to them right now. And you might be able to land their 2nd wide receiver for your 4th running back. And those are the kinds of moves you want to make. And it goes back to why I said, never draft a defense or a kicker. Give yourself extra wide receivers and running backs so that you can offer these guys 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s. And one of the keys of trading is if the 1 is the only superstar in the trade, if you gave up 3 players for the 1 superstar, you probably won that trade.
Yeah, you have to take advantage. I mean, not to be mean and say you have to take advantage of people, but
no, you do.
Yes, you do. Better. You definitely have to, especially in fantasy.
You do. In fantasy football, you do. I know Faith is in here, and she's afraid of trading. She does not like trading, but I mean, it could greatly help your team in. Here, I want to do something here that is a little bit out of character for me, but I would like the Burrow to Chase connection. Yeah.
There you go. FF Chalupa Batman does have some he has some trade capital. He's got 4 decent wide receivers he can offer up for a trade. Yeah. He's got Jefferson and AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel, and also DK Metcalf, which of course the quarterback situation in Seattle is a little dicey right now. So his value of DK is really gonna I wouldn't say plummet, but it's not going to be like it used to be.
And we talked about this last week too, is always know your league settings. The great thing about Zach's team, that's Zach is Chalupa Batman. Zach can start all 4 of those wide receivers. So even if he doesn't get a trade partner, he has a starting lineup right there. And that's very important because the people who love 0 running back, you have to know your breaking point. If you can only start 3 wide receivers and you start your draft with 6 wide receivers, you're shooting yourself in the foot at that point. You better hope that your league likes to trade. But what if you end up in a league with 10 faiths who are intimidated by trading? Now you have 6 wide receivers, no running backs, and no hope really. So
Kyra, you did I think one of the coolest things I like to do, especially in fantasy drafts, is getting that quarterback wide receiver combination. You did that with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
And Kelly just followed suit. I just want to throw that out
She
there.
did as well. So tell me about how the advantages are having a quarterback and a wide receiver on the same team that play for the actual same team in the actual NFL team. Talk to me about like the advantages that you have.
Yeah, so I love to do that if I could. Don't try to reach for it. Sometimes people really push that objective, but I mean, it's super beneficial. All it takes is one play and you could have been down, 20 points and all of a sudden you're back in the game because you're getting a 65-yard touchdown from Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. And, God forbid you get the plus bonus points and stuff, that could majorly change the outcome of your matchup that week. So I like to do that if possible, but it's not something that I will reach for or prioritize specifically. But if I'm able to do it, yeah, I will absolutely take advantage and try to pair up. I also like to do it with my tight end because I feel like tight ends, if you have, Travis Kelsey, Patrick Mahomes, or you have, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, even that Derek Carr, Darren Waller would have been nice because I feel like tight ends don't always get us the most points. And sometimes it's nice for the quarterback tight end combination to be a thing. I'm sorry, I'm picking, so I'm looking and then thinking at the same time.
You're fine.
Okay, fine.
I want to kind of rewind to something because Kelly put a extremely interesting comment in the chat that I'm going to pop up on screen. And this is something that happens to fantasy managers every year without fail. We get attached to the players on our team.
I'm about to do it.
There you go. And I love that she said that because this is something whenever I'm talking to someone new, I tell them not to do this. This is step 1 is you don't get any more credit for their past points. So if you want to trade somebody who you think is who may have had the best part of their season for someone who is yet to have the best part of their season, don't get extremely happy about what that guy gave you 4 weeks ago. You got those points once and you're not going to get them again. So Kyra, I'll let you talk about this. How do you, as someone who adores trading, do you just separate them in your mind? Obviously, you have your favorite players, and I bet you lean Philadelphia Eagles. But is that something that you consciously make an effort? Like, I can't fall in love with this guy because he's right now on my fantasy team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. It's honestly the hardest for me after, the rookie draft. So, I wanted Devonta Smith absolutely everywhere after the rookie draft. And that's when you could take advantage of me because I'm willing to give a lot, to be able to get him. But you know what? You really need to not be biased in that way. Even right there, when I took Devonta Smith, it wasn't because I was trying to reach. I still look for the value of who could be the wide receiver 1 clear cut path to target. So I'm looking at the board again. Devonta Smith for me, I don't know, other than Dallas Goedert, and I don't know what they're going to do draft wise this year, but I think Devonta Smith has an opportunity to have a sophomore leap. So that's why I went that route. But yeah, you cannot let people take advantage of you because of your love of your team. People try to do it to me all the time in Dynasty, especially. They'll see my name is Wednesday Adams, and when Wentz was there, so they're like, "Ooh, Eagles fan. Let me just try to," And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm also not an idiot." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know the value of my players. I don't forget it. You cannot take advantage of me because I like the Eagles. It's just not going to happen. You can't let your heart lead and not your brain.
But that's actually another thing I love to do because while you can be conscious of that, the other people in your league may not be.
Usually are not. They're willing to give it all.
Yep. Look for team logos as avatars. Look for punny names that lean towards a team because I'm from Northeast Ohio. Most of my leagues are all Cleveland Browns fans. I will take a Cleveland Browns player and try to move them immediately because we want that ability. I play in a league right now. It's a redraft league, and we went to go check. It's a keeper league, but nobody held on to Deshaun Watson last year. And one of my friends was like, I immediately went to get him because I know some Browns fan in this league is going to pay way too much for him. Knowing your league mates, and that's a little harder when you're drafting with a bunch of people you don't know, but look for avatars, look for the group chat, be the first person in the group chat to ask, what's everybody's favorite team? And that seems like such an innocent question. It's not. Take advantage of that info that they just gave you. Yeah. I love that Kyra said, we shouldn't say take advantage. We absolutely should say take advantage.
I would say this too. If you're like a new player, like a beginner, like you've never really played, fantasy, you've kind of toyed around with it too. You have to go into that. I'm going to, first place is mine. Like you really have to be strategic about how am I going to get the best players or how am I going to make this trade? You really kind of have to be a sneaky asshole sometimes. You really have to. And especially when it comes to getting those trades and taking advantage of, I love this player. Don't love your players. Look at your players as values. How am I going to get the best value of the guys that I have? And I'm going to look at other people's rosters as, okay, I see this player. Let me see if I can throw out this little trade bait scenario with these people about, hey, I need to have this player. I'm going to do everything I can to trade for this player. I'm going to do what it takes. So don't go into this. I love Carson Wentz or I love Kyler Murray. Well, Kyler Murray, the back half of the season didn't really do well. So if you're looking to get rid of a quarterback and you have a quarterback on the bench that's doing well and better than Kyler Murray, I can't even say Kyler today.
I was going to you hit Kyler every time. It's Murray.
Murray, I can't even say it.
Right now.
You just really have to look at other people's rosters. Okay, they need a quarterback and I need a wide receiver. Let me dangle Mr. Kyler Murray today, and let me see. I can't even say it. Let me see if I can get the wide receiver out of it. So just go into the mindset of, you love your favorite players, but just look at the values. If you really want to win your league, look at the values of the players and try and get them as best as possible, especially if you didn't like your draft as much and, you see a couple teams that have those players that you want, don't fret. It's the beginning of the season. Players are going to get hurt. They're going to get traded. They're going to be, maybe suspended or put on the bench. So just because you didn't draft well, I've seen people that have drafted horrible. I've done horrible drafts. But, I ended the season either in the playoffs or in that top 3, depending on your payouts are for your league as first, second, or third. So just don't get discouraged if your draft ends up being terrible.
Yeah. So speaking of terrible, something that I just did, which I hate when I do this, is I always undervalue running backs sometimes in drafts. So I really like to load up on wide receivers just because I think that they have more of the ability to get me a lot of points, especially like in the later rounds. Like I just think the value is definitely more in wide receiver. If you miss out on running backs, like we went on that huge running back run in the beginning and I wasn't crazy and I didn't want to reach. So I didn't. So, my running backs ended up being Derrick Henry. I went with Breece Hall just because I think that he's a great talent. I think he's going to go somewhere good, that he's going to return RB1 value for me. And then I kind of ignored the position for a while. I just kept on going with the best available. I kept on going wide receiver, and I got myself in a situation where my depth at running back is like dismal, especially compared to wide receiver. So I have to look at the board here.
I like the Rashad Penny pick.
No, well, I'm going to tell you.
I like it.
That's the last time I'm going to like a running back probably in this draft. and it's based mostly on the fact that I think that he had a great back half of the season. I think that as long as he stays healthy, he can provide value. I think losing Russell Wilson was obviously huge, and their offense is probably going to suck unless they figure something out what to do quarterback wise there. But you have to, when it does get down to the nitty gritty there, and you're looking at, hold on one second. Here we go again.
Fantasy Faith getting Adam Thielen in this round in round 9. I like that, even though.
I was down on Thielen last week, and I gave Kelly a hard time about Thielen. I think it's going to matter where he falls on your team. So as a wide receiver 3, I'm going to be honest, I still don't quite know how I feel about Thielen, but round 9 in a 12 team.
That's a good pick.
It's the 100th pick almost. It feels better. I know Kelly's not going to like me here and hearing me talk up her players from last week after my poor performance. So.
Are we not supposed to take rookies?
Oh, you 100% take rookies.
You can take rookies all you want.
Okay. Didn't you take Breece Hall?
I did, but I mean, no one else is.
Yeah. Wait. Oh, yeah. Faith has Cook, and then I thought I saw.
I mean, it just sucks because we don't know their
Drake
their
London's out
landing
there, yeah.
spot, but I'm just going based off talent alone.
Yeah. And I kind of want to address that because a lot of people ask why we're not doing Dynasty yet. The big thing about this show is going to be teaching. And Dynasty, as nice as it is still rather niche. Redraft is where everything's going to come into play. So we're definitely starting with redraft. We are going to do Dynasty drafts coming up. We are going to do rookie drafts coming up. So you're going to see a lot of those things out of the show, but we wanted to start off with the most accepted group possible. And that's why we started the show with redraft. But
also the most drafted type of drafts is the redraft one. I mean, a lot of people go into Dynasty, and Dynasty drafts are they're more intricate. They're really more complicated because you have rookie drafts to do. You really have to pay attention year round to fantasy when it comes to being in a dynasty league. And of course, Ryan, we haven't really touched on auction drafts either.
Yeah, and we can certainly do one of those. I am a person who I'm only in one auction league, and they are very intimidating to people. So I would I don't know how well that would translate to a show, but I mean, why the hell not try it out? I think we could have a lot of fun with that. And I have some friends in this industry who swear by auction drafts, and I'll even see if we can get some of them on the show when we do those shows. But auction drafts are very fun. In a league or in a system where we always tell you get your guy, auction draft gives you the ability to get your guy better than any other draft as long as you budget correctly, because you can walk away with every player you've ever wanted.
I need to draft.
You want to know what else I wanted to touch on when I was talking about the running back situation? These ADPs right now on Sleeper are a little wonky. I mean, granted, I was able to get Jamar Chase where I did, and I feel like that's specifically because he was he had a low ADP. I think it's the ADPs from last year that are still on here. They're
50-50. I don't know where the ADP is from. It may even be from mock drafts, and you're going to see wonky things happen in mock drafts. I don't know where that they're 100% from last year because the rookies are involved, but they are definitely wonky. And we talked about that a lot last week, is watch how the site sorts players.
So something that was important that I learned so one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to religiously is the late round podcast with JJ Zachariason. And he said so when you get to this point with the running back like purgatory, where there's just like running back committees, split backfields, things that are just not clear anymore, how do I find value at the running back position this late in the game? And when he did this study, it was pretty much about split backfields, and the ADP has to be correct. So I mean, right now it's me guessing. I'm assuming that Rashad Penny might go above Chris Carson just because I think that, he had the back problem, he's injury ridden, and Rashad Penny was the most relevant player at the end there. So I think that maybe his ADP is going to be higher. So what you're supposed to do, what the statistical and analytical says to do is pick the RB1 considered by ADP. So in a situation where, to give example, I mean, some of these examples are going to be a little bit off because I'm trying to remember from last year, but so last year there was like a Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, there was Chase Edmonds, James Conner, there was I'm trying to think I don't know. There's a couple situations like that are hard to decipher through. And last year was a little bit of an outlier, so this is going to sound wrong almost. But you were supposed to pick Chase Edmonds because his ADP was higher than James Conner, and he's a pass catching back. That was important because you want to get those points plus whatever, But James Conner, if it wasn't for all those touchdowns, he wouldn't have looked that good on paper for fantasy in comparison. So that's one way you're supposed to look at it. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. Yes, Javonte Williams was the rookie. He's definitely going to be better this year. I promise you that. But for the most part, Melvin Gordon carried that torch in the beginning there. So I mean, not that these values are huge and they're not going to pay off dividends, but usually that is what you are supposed to do. Looking at the values in ADP, analytically, it's paid off more with running backs in the late round. So if you're at that point in the draft where you're just not sure, just go with the running back that has the higher ADP. That's usually the one that's going to pay off better for you.
Yeah. We're rolling into our last couple of rounds, and I wanted to ask you both. Give me a couple of players, if you want, that are going to have an uptick this year, and then also you're going to see maybe a dip in their numbers fantasy-wise. Any players that come to mind?
I haven't started.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Give me a player or a couple of players that come top of mind that you're going to see, an uptick in fantasy, some that might see a downturn in fantasy, or some that might even just come out of nowhere and just be huge fantasy studs this year.
First guy that comes. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
First guy comes to me for is AJ Dillon. I think you're going to see a situation in Green Bay where they're going to need to use Aaron Jones more as a pass catcher. So the AJ Dillon hype while Devonta Adams was there kind of felt out of order. With Devonta Adams gone, they're not going to be able to replace Devonta Adams in this free agency. It's just not going to happen. Aaron Jones is definitely the best pass catcher on that team right now. If you see Aaron Jones, who is not unfamiliar with splitting out into the slot, playing wide receiver more, that's going to be more AJ Dillon in the background, and that's going to backfield. And I think you're going to see more carries, more touchdown opportunity for AJ Dillon. So that's a running back that I could see definitely uptick moving into the season.
What do you got? Anybody that's going to be like usually a usual fantasy star, or usually a fantasy standout? Do you see any high profile players kind of taking a dip in production, maybe being a dud this year?
Some people that I just worry about in general, if we're worried about maybe an age model kind of thing. Travis Kelsey is someone that I know it sounds crazy, but he makes me a little bit worried. He's just getting up there. They added Juju. There's some targets to be taken away. Not that I think he's going to be bad, but I mean, we're used to him being the tight end one almost every year. And we saw him lose that crown to Mark Andrews this year. Not that we're disappointed in having Travis Kelsey, but I can see that being something that happens. DK Metcalf, somebody that worries me. Tyler Lockett, somebody that worries me, just because losing that,
just basically the whole offense in Seattle in general is just
they're going to be somebody that I could see having, a hard time and struggling. I'm looking at the draft. I mean, there's a couple guys that I think we're going to be arguing about them being at the top of the draft next year. Is Javonte Williams stands out to me probably the most.
To me, he's mocked wise. I think he's just getting drafted way too high as of right now because you don't know what the whole offense is really going to look like in Seattle, and obviously you still have Melvin Gordon there for the time being. But now with Russell Wilson coming in there, the way the offense is really going to be, it's going to be more spread out to me. And plus, since Russell is up there in age, he's not going to be running for his life than he was in Seattle. So if they're going to have a real two-set running back tandem, obviously like last year that we saw, it was a 50-50 split between Williams and also Gordon. So it might be that the same way. So taking Williams really high to me is I wouldn't do it. I would wait on him just to kind of see what they're going to be doing maybe in the offseason when it comes to OTAs and how they're really going to set their offensive schemes.
And that's exactly, because I've been bringing this up and I've said it a ton last week. I follow systems and it's a Green Bay-esque system, and that's always been two running backs. How many times have we been banging our head against the wall complaining about two running backs being used in Green Bay? We're likely to see the same thing in Denver. I still like Williams. I still think there's a huge year two breakout coming, but it's going to come down to price. I'm going to throw one more name out there because it was such a weird year for him last year, and nobody's willing to accept how weird of a year it was for him. Do we really think Deebo Samuel is a perpetual top 5 wide receiver? He's certainly not being drafted like that, and I'm happy to see that. But man, you have to think it's a step back, right?
I was actually going to mention him. My thing about him is the quarterback change. So say Trey Lance does come in, it's usually we see kind of a regression when there is like a new young rookie quarterback coming in, and you don't know what the offense is necessarily going to look like. You don't know what Trey Lance could take away from Deebo's game that, he has legs on him too. So I think that Deebo Samuel had his prolific year last year. I still think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's still a great asset, but I don't know that we can expect the same or better out of him next year.
I would say also to look at him because he was also really kind of used as a hybrid guy because he was both a running back and a wide receiver too as well. And they Raheem Mostert is now in Miami. So are they going to maybe use him more as a running back too instead of a wide receiver? So it's like you guys said, it's just kind of depends on how the system is going to be if Jimmy G is not going to be there this coming year. So I agree with
I also think J.K. Dobbins, he's another one that I'm interested in this year. I think that, again, something that happens, and this happened with Deebo Samuel actually this year, and why I was able to get a value on him in drafts last year was people forget players when they get injured. For some reason, they just forget the talent. They forget what they could do, and they fall in drafts for that reason. I think J.K. Dobbins has the ability to have a ton of touchdowns next year. I think he has the ability to take on a huge workload. I know that Lamar Jackson is also on, obviously a rushing quarterback, and that kind of hurts his value. But I mean, when J.K. Dobbins was playing, he when they gave him the reins finally at the end of the year there, he looked fantastic. And I think that it could only get better for him. So he's somebody that I find to be a value in drafts for next year for sure.
I'm going to throw a question up from the chat here. I'm going to let you just tackle this one. It's a hell of a question. Try not to take the rest of the show answering it, but it's a great question on a dynasty rebuild. So
numbers.
So the long and short of it is a looks like it's a big dynasty. He took over an orphan, 1 QB, but then they're playing 10 offense, 11 defense. He has Dalvin Cook, but he's at a full rebuild. He's being offered the 103, the 306, the 308, a third next year for Cook and Madison. So the entire Minnesota backfield. Is that enough for that on a rebuild when you're starting friggin' 11 offensive players plus IDP?
So he has the 1.03 in this draft.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I was reading off there.
No, you're good. You're good.
1.03 in this draft. These are all 22. I mean, I would hope to get. I mean, it's Dalvin Cook. He's still a huge asset. I think that those threes really just don't mean much to me in 2022. I'm not big on. So I'm really thinking when I look at this, I mean, the threes there are such lottery picks that they could be absolutely nothing. And you could be only receiving a 1.03 for Dalvin Cook and Madison. Even Madison alone holds some value too. So he's giving up Cook and Madison, right?
He's giving up the Minnesota backfield to get all those draft picks on a full rebuild.
I think he could even get given how valuable Madison is going to be to that Cook owner, just knowing how much injuries he receives and how injury prone he is and what that could mean. I don't know. I feel like you could do a little bit better. Maybe get a second instead of one of those thirds. I'd feel a little bit better about it. I would be hoping I could replace him at 1.03 for a running back. I would hope to get a Breece Hall, but you don't know. I mean, I don't know.
What's his other running back? I mean, he's got the starter and the backup.
Is this a super flex? It better be a super flex.
No, he said it's one QB.
Oh, one QB. Okay. So Breece Hall is not even going to be there.
Nope, Breece Hall will be the 101.
He's not going to be able to replace his running back, in my opinion, of Dalvin's caliber. I would probably try to find a different trade offer there personally.
There you go.
I'd rather keep Dalvin than have the 1.03.
I say, and it's so what basically here is trying to say, I think, is attack higher picks. So versus him throwing you all these thirds, try to get a second off of him in this year and maybe another second next year. So
or a second in 2023 instead or something. Yeah, 2023 is, obviously the class that we Faith could hear Benson. Yeah, he's driving me crazy, Faith. But yeah, 2023 is such a loaded class that to hell with the third. I mean, if this guy wants to make a deal, at least try to get a second out of it. You could probably get a decent player. I just feel like you could do better for Dalvin Cook. I would ask for them to put out a better offer if they really want him.
We're coming up on our last,
or even ask for a play. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
I really don't care too highly for third round picks in rookie drafts, especially when losing such a big asset. Like, give me like
I would ask for a player.
I was going to say, you have to rebuild a whole team. So, ask for a wide receiver 3 or something, even wide receiver 4 over a third round rookie pick.
We're coming up on our last round.
Oh, it's my turn.
Before we get into the last round, any sleepers that you guys should really kind of, for the people out there, just to pay attention to in the offseason, any kind of sleeper picks that you guys have coming into this year?
I haven't dug deep into it yet. Rookie wide receivers, watch for the guys taken in the second and the third round who are going to move up depth charts easily. Tight end late. Zach just gave us a prime example of why you should be looking for tight end late if you don't get one of the studs. Zach Ertz was a top 5 tight end last year that Zach just landed in the 12th round. He's back in his exact same situation. There's no reason to expect major regression from Zach Ertz. But when you're looking at these guys at the end of the draft, I had a bunch of them marked and they all went in a row. Jacoby Myers, for New England should be great. They made sure they were keeping him around, and he just went. He's a PPR darling. This is only half PPR, but still, he went in the 12th round. Russell Gage could play a lot of slot for Tampa Bay. Kadarius Toney's a very popular guy right now. Where who else do the Giants have? Rashad Bateman in the 10th round. So look for the guys rookies last year who disappointed people, and then look for the mid-round, the second and third round drafted wide receivers who end up as a wide receiver 2 on their own team.
And Kyra, you took Deshaun Watson, second to last pick.
Yeah, I did it because he's still sitting there. He could easily be a top 5 quarterback. That could be trade bait for me later on in the season, just because I have Joe Burrow. Maybe he outplays Joe Burrow, and I have Amari Cooper. No matter what, I kept the connection. So I have Amari Cooper, Deshaun Watson. I have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. So I could be happy no matter what with who my quarterback is and get a value. And maybe I could get a running back since I screwed myself so terribly for that player. I'm always looking at what I can do to fix mistakes if I make them. Maybe I could even package something for a tight end because I'm not crazy about my tight end situation. So that's why I went Deshaun Watson. He's probably going to be suspended for half part of the season also. So I could sit there and wait and see how he does there. So yeah, I also,
as messed up as it sounds, sometimes you just have to put it aside, like the personal issues you might have with a player, especially if you're playing fantasy. Yeah. Sometimes you might have to put those aside when you play fantasy.
Yeah, if I'm sitting here thinking about that, like I don't know what to think of Deshaun Watson. I think that 22 allegations is a little much for there not to be some truth to something that's going on. That just seems a little out there. Who took it? Damn it, Josh, you took my Ronald Jones. Before that. Trying to talk. You can't just let me get my player that I need.
Right? She's out here providing free entertainment, and Josh is a moron.
Now, just to let everybody know, obviously, a lot of these things could change for a lot of these players. A lot of them are still free agents out there that could sign with other teams.
Yeah.
Russell Jones is one of them. Leonard Fournette is another guy. I know Leonard Fournette is going to be meeting with the Patriots today, so he could be on New England.
I saw that.
He could be on New England. He could be on another team. So obviously, this is mocking. We're mocking this up before really all the transactions are done before the end of the season. So you want to keep that in mind too. If you're going to be, going into a league right now, just make sure to watch the news, because a lot of these players could be in different destinations before the season starts, of course.
Yep.
Yeah. So as I was saying, usually towards the end of my draft, hold on, let me get this damn. Towards the end of my draft, I'm just looking at my team as a whole, and my team as a whole, and I'm seeing like where I could make up for anything that I did that maybe I want to take a chance on. I try to find any kind of value at the end there. I went James with Williams just because he got injured and maybe he can make a recovery back and be a valuable asset on someone's team. But with the Deshaun Watson thing, what I wanted to elaborate more on is I look at people like that, like Deshaun Watson, who might be suspended at the beginning of the season. Someone didn't take him as their QB1. I'd rather get him because guess what? When as shitty as everything is surrounding him, this is me just being completely unbiased to him as a person on my fantasy team. Once he's ready to play, he's going to be good and people are going to want him. So I have no problem shipping him off for a trade if that's the case,
All right, we're coming on to our last pick. Ryan, is that you, right?
No, it's 11 right now.
Oh, they're 11.
Just popped up for
my screen is cut off because of the way I have my camera set up.
I'm laughing at Joe right now because
I saw the question.
I knew he was gonna. Well, Joe absolutely hates Cole Kmet, and he always has a lot to say about his touchdown situation. So I think it's hilarious that he's commenting on it.
All right, looks like our draft is complete.
We did it,
everybody. Great job drafting. So the end part of the show, we're going to give our takeaways from this draft. We'll also give you the league winner and also the league loser. Now, of course, the league loser is we're just having fun here. Disclaimer. Yes, just need improvement, of course. works. So before we get into the league winner and league loser, some takeaways from this draft, you two. What are your thoughts about some key picks? Ones that were maybe reaches, ones that were great picks overall. What do you got for me?
Yeah,
Kyra,
I mean, just looking here in the first round, I think Najee Harris came at a huge value where he was at. Being able to have him on that turn was huge. Joe Mixon fell. That was a huge value. Devonta Adams, Kelly, I love you to death. I would have never taken him first overall. There's no way I'm moving past Jonathan Taylor first overall. That is somebody that is like set in stone for me. Let's see what we got going on. I personally think Jamar Chase for me was a huge value where I received him at. Aaron Jones is interesting because his splits when there was no Devonta Adams, he has a huge uptick in value. Yeah. So you may be surprised at what a value he's going to be next season. I think a lot of people may think, the offense is going to be bad. So why would I want the running back on a team that has no wide receivers? But Aaron Jones is pass catching back. He could be a steal where he's at there. David Montgomery, same thing. I think Joe did great with his running backs. Jalen Waddle, 4th round. I think he could be a steal. He could be someone that we're arguably taking with the top tier of wide receivers next year. He had such a like his rookie season was so good. And usually when you see a wide receiver have such a great rookie season like that, the next year they usually take a leap, so I think Jalen Waddle was a huge value as well.
Okay. Ryan, what do you think?
I've been keeping an eye, honestly, on Breece Hall in all these drafts. I think he went 5th or 6th round in our draft last week, and then to see him jump all the way up to the 4th. So 5th or 6th round of a 10-team draft is about the 50th pick. The 4th in this draft is about the 50th pick. So I think that's about where he's going to fall in drafts. So he's someone I'm really keeping an eye on. Landing spot is obviously going to change things greatly with him, but that's someone I really want to see how everything shakes out. And then just monitoring how people are drafting quarterbacks and tight ends. This draft is way more spread out in quarterback than our last one. There was no quarterback run. I think the most we had were back-to-back quarterback picks, and that was it. There was no huge run, which is great for everybody because they didn't fall victim to, quarterbacks are going, I better go get my guy.
Yeah, I think that we have to keep in mind there's a lot of analysts in this draft here too.
Yeah.
So in your home leagues, I mean, man, it's totally different. And I'm so used to drafting with analysts that when I do play in my home leagues, sometimes I almost screw myself. I don't even look like the pro anymore because I'm used to people doing things so uniformly.
Kyra, I forgot to draft a quarterback last week.
He did.
Straight up forgot.
He did.
Yeah, you fall the late round quarterback.
Yeah. And still got Kirk Cousins with like my last pick.
Yeah, and that's why I don't mind drafting a quarterback late. That's almost always my strategy is drafting a quarterback late because hey, you can have a monster team and Kirk Cousins as your quarterback who's good enough, and that's fine,
Stream the position.
All right, Ryan, should we do the league loser first or league winner?
I don't want to put you, I want you to pick. I have 2 options. I'm not going to say who both of them are. So that way, if ever we get in a situation where you pick my winner, but I have it down. It's the same method I used last week, but let's go for it.
All right. I'm going to do, it's between 2 teams right now. And, honestly, man, Ryan, I'm going to give it to you.
Oh my goodness.
I really love your team.
It's like the office employee of the month.
I know
the entire system to make
we're gonna get like people with pitchforks and saying, "Oh, this is fixed." This is definitely. I like your team. I really like you. You led off with Najee Harris, came back around in the turn with Kelsey, and still was able to grab Connor as well, and then Scary Terry. Obviously, the quarterback situation with Carson Wentz being over Washington is, it's Carson Wentz. But when Carson Wentz plays great football, he can play great football. And then, grabbing Russell Wilson in the 10th. I like that as well. So, I mean, I think you've got a great set of wide receivers there, running backs as well. So I think you did a great job, man. Yes. Shut up, Josh. It's not rigged.
Rigged. So for me, I looked at 2 major things. And if you look at the draft board, you can probably guess who I'm going to pick on. Quarterback early, tight end early. And then I look at your entire starting lineup. I'm going to pick on my boy Hendry this week. So it's interesting. I think the person who took Cooper Kupp is the needs improvement for both weeks. I love Javonta Williams. I don't know that we're getting 100% Cam Akers next season. And then his next back is Isaiah Spiller, and I think it's Brian Robinson. I'm sorry, I don't know all these guys in the draft yet. Isaiah Spiller and Brian Robinson. So you have 2 rookie running backs that we don't even have landing spots on. You went Josh Allen early, which I'm not totally against, but I just don't know that you need it. And then you still took Matt Stafford when you need depth. Dallas Goedert, middle round tight ends always feel like a trap. I feel like if you're not going to take one of the early guys, take a much later guy. And then you look at Elijah Moore, who we don't know quite yet as your wide receiver 2, though you could just slide Mike Williams there, but then Moore is still your 3 with Garrett Wilson and Gabe Davis on the backup, Russell Gage. There's just a lot of question marks in those 2 flex spots. You have a great quarterback, but what did it cost you? And then we hope Dallas Goedert is the guy again, but we don't know what kind of system Philly's going to run. So I love you, Hendry. Obviously, this is a team that has a lot of great trade material. You may have to move some of your studs, one of your top 3 picks, to pick up some depth later on, or just be very active in free agency. Right now, I don't know that you have a solid RB3, and I don't know that you have a solid wide receiver 3, and that's going to hurt you in a draft like this.
Awesome. Well, Kyra, thanks for coming on Mock It Like It's Hot. Before we get on out of here, please tell us where everybody can find you.
So you guys can find me in 2 locations, of course, on Club Fantasy, where I think most people know me. And this year I'm writing for the Fantasy Pros, so you'll be able to find me and some material over there. And don't forget, once time comes around, we're back in the regular season. You can find me and Ryan Weisse right above me here, my faithful, loyal host on DFS and Chill every Sunday. We'll be back this year to be able to do that for you. That's always a lot of fun. So don't forget about us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kyra, for coming on the show. Guys, thanks for coming on as well and drafting with us once again for Mock It Like It's Hot. Be sure to check out Kelly Singh's new They See Me Polling, which will probably drop later today or tomorrow. And then the next episode of No Punt Intended, which will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's the annual Dynasty Focus show with the one and only Scott Fish. I've been wanting to be a part of his annual draft stuff each and every year, but he doesn't send me the message on Twitter. But maybe this year, Scott.
You have
you're in.
You have the right website attached to your name now. I think
I'm
all of our guys in last year, so we're going to get you in this year.
Awesome. So awesome. For myself and Ryan, the show will be back next Monday. I think, Ryan, we should probably do an auction draft. I think we should do it.
I will point out that the chat pointed out, and I'll mess around with it this week. I have time to see how long that would take.
Okay,
that
might take a while. That's true.
So
it might take a while.
I also want to address Faith. So me and Faith had this idea, which I have to play around with yet. A lot of people, since Faith is one of them, okay, are afraid of trades, or they're unsure of how to make trades. They're unsure of how to read values. They don't know. They're just not certain enough. So they end up not trading. They end up being a sitting duck. And there's nothing worse than having a team in your league that's a sitting duck that just won't make a trade. They won't counter. They won't anything because they're just simply afraid they're getting screwed over, or that they don't they think they're being taken advantage of. So we may put something together podcast wise to talk trades, to be able to make people more comfortable in doing that. Because I mean, there's one thing I think in the fantasy football community we love to hear and see is trades. Because it helps us be like, why that guy? Let me see if I can figure out something. I want to get a deal done like that. So I think that's going to be a fun thing that we're going to mess around with this offseason that you might find coming up here in 2022.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kyra, once again. For myself and Ryan, we will be back next week with our show, Mock It Like It's Hot, on Club Fantasy FFL. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the social media platforms, especially on the YouTube channel, Club Fantasy FFL. We will see you guys next week at 11 a.m.
Have a good one.
Bye.